Hello and welcome to another Giant Slayer TFT Top 5 Countdown video. Today our analysts will be listing the top 5 compositions for patch 10.15. Before we get into those top 5 comps, it's worth pointing out that the meta is extremely diverse right now. There's many viable comps for you to play and the meta is shifting daily. With that all said, let's jump on in. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come, so be sure to also follow our Giant Slayer TFT social media pages. Alright folks, let's get back to the video, and starting it off, we have JINX coming in at number 5. JINX carry basically comes in 2 flavors of viable builds. The first and more common is going to be Brawler Blaster. Blaster can be either 4 or 2, with 4 rising in popularity after buffs to Lucian and Graves in 10.15. The second composition you're likely to see JINX played in is 6 Rebels. Both builds are viable, but the more consistent choice is going to be Brawler Blaster. The reason is that you're generally going to have an easier mid-game because the units aren't too difficult to find and upgrade. JINX is going to be the hardest champion to 2-star as the default build doesn't rely on any legendary champions. Rebels, by contrast, leans heavily on finding JINX 2, Gangplank 2, and preferably Aurelion Sol 2. That makes it way more expensive and requires you to safely level to 8 or 9 in order to find all of the relevant upgrades. Also, you will 100% need Guardian Angel for your Gangplank, otherwise he's going to die before casting. How you determine which build you should go is going to be based on how strong your early and mid game is. If you have a great economy and high health by level 7, you're going to be in a great position to play 6 Rebels. Otherwise, you should play Brawler Blaster with the intent of rolling on level 7 to stabilize. In either case, your ultimate goal is going to be to find a JINX 2 and protect her, so don't focus too much on one specific trait and instead play what the game gives you. Next, we have Dark Stars as the number 4 composition. Dark Stars is doing quite well in the meta currently. A lot of it has to do with the flexibility of the champions, as you can use Jhin, Shaco, or Xerath as your primary carry. Jhin is possibly the strongest range carry currently and is played in a wide variety of builds. At the moment, the more common way to play Dark Stars is with 4, while you fill in the rest of your composition with various traits and champions. You can also splash in 2 Dark Stars for many different builds, or you can go all 6, but 4 is the most consistent. There's really no limit to what you can play with 4 Dark Star, but a few traits to look for are Mystic, Protector, Celestial, Infiltrator, or 2 Sniper. ASTRO Sniper is a separate build that we'll talk about later on in the list. So which Dark Star carry should you focus on and when? Jhin, as we said, is the popular pick but can struggle against Vanguard heavy frontlines. He's also quite contested. Shaco is better suited for sniping squishy backline champions, and Xerath, while strong overall, isn't as common to go for due to the nerfs that he received. Overall, it's popular to run both Shaco and Jhin and split your items between them. Basically, play what the game gives you. That philosophy is why Dark Stars are so good, because you can safely flex into many variations just using 4 Dark Star champions. Moving along, we have Cybernetics coming in at number 3. Good old reliable Cybernetics are doing quite well in the meta. They've had a newfound resurgence in 10.15 for a few reasons. First, Lucian received several buffs that have made early Cybernetics a powerhouse like it was in the past. Another reason is that Vanguard-focused builds aren't as common, which has been the main counter to Cybernetics last patch. Lastly, Vayne did get a minor buff, not by much, but enough to make her an okay carry for the mid-game. Combine all of those reasons and boom, you have Cybernetics rising to the top. But keep in mind that they aren't always consistent because finding Echo 2 can be difficult and he's a big win condition for your late game. Aurelia also suffers from being a melee carry, which makes her susceptible to CC or having issues getting into the backline. That all said, Cybernetics are still one of the simplest builds to run, as you just need to find 6 Cybernetics plus Thresh and either Riven or Shen. Items are also relatively open, as the only hard requirement being Last Whisper for your main carry that's either Vayne or Aurelia. Echo can use a wide assortment of on-hit items plus damage items, and your frontline can be given any defensive or utility items such as Shroud, Bramble Vest, Ionic Spark, or Warmogs. The flexibility of items along with how simple the build is to run makes Cybernetics an easy composition to default if you're unsure what to play. Up next is the composition coming in at number 2 on our list, Protector/Legendary. This build is more or less a playstyle than it is a focus on particular traits or champions. Most of the time it's going to utilize Protectors as its frontline, but outside of that trait, your focus is mainly on what legendary champions you can find. It's a playstyle with the most volatility due to the nature of it relying so heavily on 5-cost champions. By that we mean you can easily go bottom 4 with it just as easily as you can top 2. The idea behind this build, or rather playstyle, is to make your way towards the late game, specifically level 9, and play 5-cost champions as your carries. Protectors are a viable frontline throughout the game, which makes them ideal for this build. Jarvan, for example, is still strong enough to carry the early game. It also relies on finding Bard to help accelerate your leveling so you can get to level 9 faster than usual. Commonly played 5-cost champions in the composition are Janna, Aurelion Sol, Urgot, and Echo. Xerath is also a decent late game carry when paired with Janna. Lulu is great for Mystic, and Thresh is great for his utility of pulling in additional champions. We should also point out that this playstyle may fall off as the meta develops. With so many builds being viable, the meta may focus more on mid-game, making it difficult to find enough 2-star 5-cost champions for this playstyle to do well. That said, it's doing alright so far in 10-15, so it may remain viable. And the composition coming in at number 1 on today's list is Astro Sniper. It's probably not a surprise considering how popular Astro Sniper is. But we should point out that due to how popular it is, as well as how contested Jhin is, it may be difficult to actually play this build consistently. It's the type of composition you should look to play when the game gives you the champions, but forcing it often ends poorly. What are the core champions for Astro Sniper? The 4 champions you'll need as the foundation for this build are Jhin, Teemo, Gnar, and Nautilus. With just those 4 champions, you get a great frontline, lots of CC, and a mix of both magical and physical damage. Keep in mind that it's an expensive composition since it relies on 3 4-cost champions, so making sure that you go into level 7 with a good economy and health is essential for doing well with this build. Outside of those 4 champions, you can play a lot of variations. 4 Darkstar, 4 Sniper, Mystic Celestial are just a few of the viable options. 4 Sniper is likely the most common variation. You'll look to add in Ashe and Caitlyn with Wukong to strengthen your frontline. From there, you can add in Mystic with Karma and Lulu, or more frontline depending on what you need. Jhin items are somewhat flexible, although Last Whisper, Infinity Edge, and Guardian Angel are likely the best for him. Teemo is more or less flexible as he requires at least a blue buff in either Morellonomicon or Deathcap. Outside of that, you can itemize as needed, just make sure you have at least 1 item for both of your carries. That is going to be it for our top 5 compositions for patch 10.15. Again, we should point out that this meta is extremely diverse with many builds being viable, which is why we have a few honorable mentions to go over. Most of these are strong and popular builds that mainly suffer from consistency issues. Up first for the honorable mentions is BLADEMASTER. This will either be Xayah carry or Master Yi carry depending on what items you have and whether you have a good Xayah start or not. Xayah carry is commonly known as Shredder and is a hyper-roll composition that seeks to 3-star Xayah and Jarvan early on in the game. From there, you can either go 3 BLADEMASTERs or 6. The indicators for this build are starting the game out with multiple Xayahs, Jarvans, and decent Xayah items such as Last Whisper, Deathblade, or Infinity Edge. Master Yi carry is also known as Slash Bros and uses 6 BLADEMASTERs plus 3 Rebels. It relies on hitting Master Yi 3 as your win condition. Items have changed slightly with RFC still being core, but Runaan's Hurricane also being a necessary item for Yi now. Your last item will be Deathcap, Rageblade, or a second Runaan's. As we mentioned, both BLADEMASTER builds are popular in the meta, and they mainly suffer from being inconsistent as they rely on 3-starring the carry to do well. Our next honorable mention is Star Guardian Sorcerer. It's a build that remains extremely popular in the meta and can still place well, but suffers from being rather inconsistent. While Syndra is still the main carry, you can also look to rely on Victor instead. Overall, not much is different about this build from last patch, and the biggest issue is how poorly it can do into a lot of meta compositions. This is mainly due to the lack of a front line that the build has. It's a build that lives and dies on its carry ramping up, whether that's Syndra getting multiple casts off or Victor. Without a strong front line, it's difficult for those champions to ramp up enough to kill the enemy carry. That said, it's still a strong composition that can hold its own as a top build, but be aware of its inconsistencies and don't force it every game. The second to last honorable mention is Vanguard Mystic. Honestly, this build is still great, and unlike many of the other honorable mentions on our list, it's actually relatively consistent. It's a middle of the pack composition. By that, we'll mean it'll earn you a top 4 finish, maybe even a top 3, but really, it's not going to get you first or second a lot of the time. Because it's unlikely to get you a first place finish most games is why it's just an honorable mention, at least for now. Vanguard Mystic really ebbs and flows in viability based on the current meta. While it may not be as popular at the moment, it could very well rise up again as the meta settles down. All in all, if you're going to run Vanguard Mystic, do it with the intent of playing to get a top 4. Maybe you had a rough early game where too many players are contesting Jin. Or most of the lobby is going to have physical damage compositions. Those are fantastic times to play Vanguard Mystic, especially the 6 Vanguard variation. Keep in mind you do need specific items for Cassiopeia, those being Blue Buff, Morellonomicon, and preferably Rapid Fire Cannon. And our last honorable mention is Mech. This is a build we're not sure is going to do well or not as the meta develops. It has been seen to do well, but the current statistics don't point at it as being a particularly popular build. But that may easily change over time. There are several variations of mech such as Infiltrator, Battlecast, and Sorcerer, but we're going to focus on the most common. That is Infiltrator, Victor, and usually Mystic. Demolitionists are also common to add with Gangplank. Victor serves as a strong backline carry, while Infiltrator buffs your mech while getting onto the enemy backline. Items on the Super Mech are also up in the air right now. Commonly, you'll want defensive items like Bramble Vest, but a focus on dodge items like Shroud and Quicksilver are quickly becoming standard. You can also look to add damage to your mech by building items like Bloodthirster or Guardian Angel. There are many unknowns currently about what the best version of mech is, so it's very difficult to say which you should focus on. And that's really the crux of the issue with mech. It may become a dominant build for 10-15, or it could also remain an outlier that does well enough some games, but poorly in others. That is going to be it for today's video, folks. The meta is really all over the place right now, so expect there to be a ton of changes over the course of the next week. Really, you can almost play anything, and it has the potential to do well. Let us know in the comment section below what builds you've been climbing with, and if there's any you think should have made it on the top 5. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.